Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending upon where you are in the world, and welcome to today's DevOps.com webinar. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, moderator for today's event, and I welcome you. As always, we have a great webinar on tap, but before we get started, we do have a few housekeeping items we need to go over. First of all, today's event is being recorded, so if you miss any or all of the event, you will have the opportunity to access it later on. Following today's webinar, we will be sending out an email that contains a link to access the webinar on demand. And we are taking questions from the audience. So if at any time during today's presentation you have a question for our speakers, please don't wait, don't hesitate, just use your GoToWebinar control panel and submit your question, and we'll try to get to as many as we can near the end of today's webinar. Also happening at the end of today's webinar, we are going to be doing a drawing for 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So please stick around. Hopefully you'll be one of our 4 lucky winners. All right, with that, let's go ahead and kick off today's webinar, which is the Bumpy Road to Actionable SLOs. Our speaker today is Curtis Krischuk, who is the Technical Product Manager at Instana, and he may be joined during the question and answer period by Yury, who is also a technical product manager at Instana. Curtis, thanks so much for joining me today. Really appreciate it.
Great. Everybody, thank you for joining us today. The topic is the Bumpy Journey to Actionable SLOs. And we're going to kick off with a quote from Yogi Berra, who said, "In theory, there is no difference between theory and practice. In practice, there is." It's not often you start a discussion with a quote. Why are we doing this? Well, the reason we start with this quote is there's a lot of SLO methodology information that's educational, and we really need that. But the content we're going to discuss here is more practical in nature, hence the quote. Instana has just launched support for the SLO methodology, and although we would love to talk to you about it, that's not the topic of this conversation. When we develop a new capability like this, there's a lot of customer engagement and interaction. And this presentation summarizes the practical lessons from 20 companies, what those 20 companies have learned during their SLO journey. So this is going to inform you, hopefully illustrate to you some of the bumpy things that you want to avoid and how to avoid them. The agenda is pretty simple. We're going to just discuss the promises of the SLO methodology, a very quick review to make sure we're all on the same page. The bulk of the content is in the practical journey to SLO use, and then we'll end by summarizing lessons learned along the way. But before we jump in, there's a quick polling question we'd like to present to you, and please feel free to engage with it.
All right, the polling question should be on your screen now. The question is, how far along are you in your journey to SLOs? You can select from, we do not plan to work on SLOs, interested in SLOs but haven't started yet, we just started with SLOs, we tried it but it didn't work out as we expected, or we succeeded in implementing SLOs. So you can go ahead and make your choice. And while we're waiting for the audience to make its choice, I do want to just quick reminder that today's event is being recorded, so you will have the opportunity to listen to it again if you're with us now, or on demand later on if you haven't had a chance to join us yet. Also want to remind the audience that we are taking questions at any time during the presentation, so you don't have to wait for the question and answer period. If you have a question at any time, just use your GoToWebinar control panel and submit your questions. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close out to the polling question and let you get back to your presentation, Curtis.
Oh. Thank you very much. So the first thing we want to talk about was the promises of the SLO methodology and what it can accomplish. As a technical product manager, I have one side of my brain that focuses on the engineering things, and it appeals to me from my engineering side. But I also engage with business challenges, and it also appeals to me on those business challenges. And so it's a unifying force that we can use. And this is because we can have higher customer satisfaction by meeting the customer SLAs. it's a way, as I mentioned, for the engineering and the business side to come together through consistent reporting about reliability. And because it's company-wide, it can become a company-wide decision-making tool where you can start making business and technical trade-offs. And that then enables the investment to become data-driven. So there's a lot of opportunity here. So let's talk about the actual practical side of this. We're going to talk about 10 steps in this SLO methodology journey. Rather than just present slide after slide, we're gonna try this as an interactive sort of journey and to use the different personas that we become used to. In each of these steps, we're going to summarize the lessons learned as anti-patterns or positive patterns. And the journey begins with the heroic site reliability engineer who takes his first step. He reads the SRE material and intuitively understands its value. It makes so much sense. The benefits seem so obvious, and he can't wait to begin. And so he sees the things that make it so promising. He just wants to run out and to begin. But the anti-pattern here is that he might think this is only a technical problem. It really involves cultural change, tweaking, shifting, changing existing business processes. It touches more things than just the technical side of things. And because of this, it isn't a straight line to the end goal. There'll be left turns, right turns. There'll be delays. He may have to restart. And so the anti-pattern here would have him underestimating the effort and time. But that does not deter the heroic SRE. Undaunted, our SRE teams up with the developer to hack some SLOs. The discussion starts off with the user as a center, as it should. But then the topic of troubleshooting comes up. To address troubleshooting, they say, well, why don't we add new SLOs for the backend? Well, now notice that the SLOs are no longer just customer facing. Being concerned that there may be mission creep, they strive to start with what they have. And unfortunately, some metrics aren't being recorded, so more instrumentation is needed. Well, recognizing that things are getting bigger and the value is being diluted, the teammates start to have second thoughts. And here we have another anti-pattern. And the anti-pattern stems from thinking this is just a technical issue or concern. They need to involve what we call a product owner, the product manager, somebody from the business side of things. And I'm going to be referring to the product manager as representing that business owner. We also see that the SLOs have had mission creep onto the back end. This dilutes the SLO value. And because we've had mission creep on the back end, there now needs to be new measurements added, so there's more time invested. The dilution is happening in the metrics and the SLOs, and so this is what we might say a straight path to SLO without teeth. Well, deciding on a different approach. The SRE involves the product manager. And he starts by discussing the SLO methodology. Once he starts to talk about trade-offs around reliability, he notices the product manager has a different reaction. There's a stiffening here. How do you think the product manager reacts? Well, as a product manager, I can vouch that we're very good at saying no in a polite manner. The product manager is concerned about this. This seems like a new initiative, and it isn't clear how it integrates with his business goals. So he's not willing to commit to anything, but he's still curious. He has a lot of respect for the SRE, so he starts asking questions. But he doesn't understand the answers he's hearing. So rather than waste this meeting, he decides to use it to ask that a business KPI he feels is really important to make some informed business decisions. He'd like to see this business KPI be added. Well, now the SRE becomes frustrated that the product manager is standing in the way of something he considers so obvious. So he changes his plan to use the SLI for his own use. They'll use it in the engineering department if they can't use it to make business decisions. Well, here we have another anti-pattern. What's going on is they're really speaking different languages using the same words. And because there's no common understanding, there's no intersection of what they each consider value. Now this is a very difficult point for the SRE. He has three options before him. One option is he can use up his own political capital and try to push the SRE initiative or the SLO initiative through. Another option is he can find an executive sponsor who's willing to use up their own political capital to push the SLO initiative through. Or the third way is to convince the product manager so that the product manager becomes an ally. It seems like that third way is the right way. And so if we step back, I'm sure you've had conversations like this. And this is where many SLO initiatives die because of the impasse. Now, the engineering team may decide that there's value here, and they may use the SLOs as yet another metric, and they may alert on that metric. But the problem is that now the promise of the SLO methodology is not achieved because it was intended to be a corporate-wide means of decision-making, a corporate-wide means of communicating and deciding on trade-offs. Well, our hero decides to take another approach. He decides, rather than talking technical, he's going to ask questions that are important to the product manager. He asks questions about error budget or high latency. He asks, do you want to wait on a marketing campaign until things are more reliable and thereby you have a higher conversion rate? Well, this catches the product manager's interest. He's beginning to see how this might relate to revenue or satisfying business goals. The product manager understands that there isn't a clear connection to his important business KPIs, but that there's some sort of relationship here. This is worth discussing a little more. And the positive pattern we see here is that the SRE is showing that the SLIs are related to important business KPIs. So now we're having common interests start to form. There's intersection on value on both sides. And when you have that intersection, you can start having discussions such as talking about implementing a relevant business KPI and doing a little more instrumentation to be able to capture that SLI. You start to have discussions about how SLO methodologies and the fulfillment of SLOs can inform business decisions. Well, now what happens is the possibility of open discussion, of compromise, trade-offs, and priorities. It becomes evident to both sides. Now we're starting to see a greater capability unfold. And in some sense, what we've had to do is we've gone forward and we've gone back, and we're restarting from the beginning. The product manager is curious. He starts to envision more customer satisfaction, which leads to more revenue. After all, SLI sounds like KPI, and he's warming up to the SLO idea. Although he does want that business KPI, he's willing to move forward on the SLI. Encouraged? Our SRE leans into the conversation. He starts to ask questions about user journeys, since this seems like a common concept that they can both understand and discuss. He asks questions about what are the most critical user journeys? What's the impact of a lack of availability or a lack of performance? Now they're talking the same language. Now they're sharing the same values. And the positive pattern here is that our SRE is recovered by reusing common language. And he's also going to find that there are existing user journeys that the business side considers to be important. And because they're important, there may be existing synthetics that he can reuse. There may be internal metric capture that he can use. So what we learn here is that the SREs need to listen carefully. When I say SRE, in some sense, this is a broad brush for technical community. The technical community needs to listen carefully and patiently because this will take time and the discussion will evolve. So you need to budget for that time and be flexible. And when you start discussing what are the important user journeys, you may have to refine what you mean by user journey. You may have to be more selective. You may have to develop a more stringent criteria about what makes a critical user journey. Now, I'm happy to report that some of the companies did it right in the beginning. And here's a brief intermission to talk about that. The companies that did it right in the beginning, they reviewed the customer-facing user journeys together with the product manager as a first step, and then they ranked them by business criticality. The third or fourth items were important because they provided a win-win situation and a way to build credibility. Well, what they did was they defined SLIs that could correlate with existing KPIs, and then they used this to understand and justify the signal quality. Because in this way, the SLIs could be said, perhaps loosely, perhaps directly, to relate to the business goals. But the successful companies, what they did is they also went further. They correlated past SLI violations with an increase in the support or incident tickets. And what this did is it not only showed that if the SLIs were successful, you would achieve a good business goal. It showed when those SLIs were violated that there was a decrease in reaching those business goals. So they validated the signal quality. And the last item is about team focus. Select a few user journeys, get them working, and then scale. We've heard that before. So these are the lessons learned from companies that did it right from the beginning. Back to our story. The next step is technical. So the SRE engages with the architect or technical leader. Together, they try to tease this apart. And they need to figure out how to model and measure the user journeys, the KPIs, and the SLOs using their existing observability model, as well as their existing tooling. Well, as they start down this journey, they realize that there's data missing and the gaps need to be filled. Their existing tooling may not be sufficient. They'll likely need to expand into application performance monitoring, the use of synthetics and integration with logs. The architect begins to realize he's been down this road before. There have been other promising approaches to solving this problem, and there's a lot of work. He's concerned about blind spots. So the anti-pattern we'd like to point out is that by focusing on the existing infrastructure, the models are starting to get too complex. And because it's becoming too complex, there's going to be more effort to implement it and also more effort to validate it. There's also the possibility of getting lost in the metrics and the data to capture, which means that the metrics, the instrumentation is becoming too granular. The last one is in some sense interesting. A lot of the important user journeys are already monitored in one fashion or another. But there's concern over using the existing synthetics or mobile monitoring to capture SLIs because of what we refer to as the not invented here syndrome. There may be another group that is responsible for those. There may be another group that developed them. And this leads to a concern that a lot of time may be spent root causing noisy signals because it was not invented here. The architect begins to wonder if they need to build all of this and wire it together. Maybe there's a tool that does this already. Well, now we can get to the fun stage. Our team gets to work. They're implementing SLIs and KPIs. They add the instrumentation. They validate the instrumentation. They start creating dashboards. They validate the SLIs correlate with the business KPIs. They might have to extend the business dashboard with that new KPI. And then they come to that day they've been waiting for, when they get their first insights into the actual service level numbers. Here we see the current availability is 82%, and only 75% of the requests are meeting the latency SLO. Wow. Our SRE is quite experienced, and he is concerned. He wonders how he's going to explain this without there being a political disaster. Recognizing also you don't want to go to your business stakeholders with a problem and not have that solution available. He starts to think he needs to get ahead of this by building a plan to increase that reliability. But it strikes him suddenly. How is he going to troubleshoot root cause service level violations? He knows this can be complicated for several reasons. First, the starting point is the user journey. So the troubleshooting needs to start from the user journey and drill down. Secondly, that drilling down is into the microservices architecture to find unhealthy downstream services that are the root cause of that service level violation. Well, the third, the issues may be due to infrastructure problems that manifest as poorly performing or unhealthy services. And drilling down in infrastructure is a different kind of drill down. He's overwhelmed. Our valiant bunch decides to set that problem of troubleshooting aside and return to the current challenge. The SRE suddenly has an epiphany. He says, what is the historical KPI values and what was their business impact? That was an important question, and we'll return to it in a second. Now we have our first SLI measurements. It's time to discuss creating an SLO. The SRE, PM, and architect, they gather together and they're simultaneously excited because they have their first data, but they're also fearful. What will they find? As the discussion goes on, they're starting to think about this and look at the number and try to relate to it. And the architect, he wonders, why don't we want 100% success rate? The SRE is trying to figure out what is the Goldilocks SLO that isn't too low or too high, but it's just right. And the product manager, being a product manager, he wants to meet his KPI, so he's inflating the success criteria for the SLO. So again, here we see some anti-patterns. And some of these anti-patterns may be beginning a little early, where looking at the data, they recognize that the SLIs don't capture the expected user impact, so the SLIs themselves need to be redefined. As mentioned, the product manager may be aggressive in picking SLO values, and the reason is he wants to make sure his business KPIs are met. Something we haven't touched on is the historical data may not exist, and that's very important because the historical data provides the context about whether the SLI was a regular value, or perhaps it was a high value or a low value. The historical data also helps you to avoid unreasonable SLOs. At this point, another anti-pattern is promoting prematurely in the organization the data that you have before the value is proven. or that historical context is available. Without that historical data, it may be unclear how to explain those first results to the business stakeholders without causing them to panic. Now, there are anti-patterns here, but there is also a positive pattern. If you remember, our SRE had that very important idea to ask what was the business impact of the data. And what he finds is that historically availability was 82% and latency was 70% successful. And there was no disaster. That was what they're currently operating with. So he suggests starting there. The product manager thinks that we can do better, and if we do better, then we'll generate more revenue, we'll meet more business goals. So he agrees to do some reliability work. And this is in defining the SLO, sharing the first results. You see the discussion forming, the compromises beginning. So the pattern here is to use the past historical data to derive the thresholds. And using that historical data, the product managers, the business owners can understand the business impact of the SLOs, and they can avoid creating unsustainable SLOs, and that they would agree to sustainable SLOs. There's also the first opportunity here to discuss what activities are needed to increase reliability. Again, before sharing this information going forward, you could have the plan of how to increase the reliability. Now is the time to go forward and demonstrate this first success to build organizational-wide support for the project. Now, we're at a step where we have our first SLO, we have some data. Now we have to identify when should we become concerned. And this is usually described as an error budget policy. With the 20 companies we interacted with, we do want to point out that there were only a few organizations that got here so far. And we use this so far because they're on a journey as well. And we would expect that as they mature, and this is really a statement about maturity, as they mature, that they will get to this point and that things will proceed. So let's talk about the SRE. What is he thinking at this point? Well, he thinks that we need to add some teeth to turn this into a decision-making tool. And by decision-making tool, it isn't just within the people who've been involved so far, it is with the business stakeholders as well. So he sees the need to have buy-in from them, but he sees the need to preemptively define what the outcome should be. So his first step is to go to the product team, and by that we mean himself as an SRE, operations teams if they're there, and importantly, the engineering team to commit to defending the SLOs. This is a very important step, that the engineering team needs to commit to defending them. Once he has that, he can engage with the business stakeholders, the product team he's already talked to, and the operations himself, and they can agree to a formal action policy. And by formal action policy, it's an agreement about the implications of violating an SLO. It's an agreement up front to possibly defer maintenance, to defer a release, to not do any new feature work until the reliability is increased. It may be to prioritize technical data reliability work above feature work. It may even involve a business decision. For example, the marketing team might want to defer a sales campaign until the reliability is better because they want to have a higher success rate. Lastly, this action policy specifies communication. The need for regular check-ins on the SLO fulfillment, and it would be more frequent within that product team, but it also needs to be communicated to the business stakeholders to keep them engaged, to make them aware, and also to promote the benefits of this. The expectation is that the potential of the SLO methodology will have a positive business impact, and this is an opportunity to point that out. Now, the delivery team did commit to meeting those SLOs, to protecting them. And what that brings us to is the need to alert when the error budget burn rate increases greatly. Well, our developer has a couple questions. He says, well, won't that be noisy? Will it give us enough time to mitigate the issue to protect that SLO? Our SRE is much more confident because he foresaw this and he went and got a PhD where his dissertation was the error budget burn rate dynamic adjustment engineering. He feels very confident that he can set those alerts. Well, the positive pattern here is that we see that teams will be asked to defend SLOs, so they need alerting. The teams that were successful, they started with a simple threshold alerting on the SLI, and then as needed, they became more sophisticated. However, in able to defend the SLO, you need to alert on trends. In particular, the error budget burn rate increases. Now, the companies that we talk to, they prefer to use a tool that can help in adjusting the error burn rate because they didn't want to go through the effort like our heroic SRE who got a PhD in error budget burn rate adjustment. And here we are, step 10. Now you've made it. You've done a dry run. You can iterate, improve, and you can scale across other offerings and organizations. At this stage, you should be viewed positively by the organization. The potential should be obvious, so you iterate and improve. Recognizing, of course, that the user journeys, the SLIs, the SLOs, and learning will evolve, and so you need to budget for that maintenance as well. So what are the other expectations and lessons learned? Now, there are some lessons that were common across the companies. And although there's a lot of excitement at first and energy, right? This is somewhat new to organizations, and so there's no one to refer to. So the first team will spend a lot of time to get started. In general, it took several weeks just to get started. And that was for smaller teams which are efficient. If you're in a larger organization where you have to report more information, you may have to get agreements with other people, it may take 2 to 3 quarters for a large organization. Of that, the first 2 to 4 weeks are really education. It's understanding the concepts. It's making them your own. Obviously, if there's no action when an SLO is violated, if your action policy isn't actually enacted or executed, the whole thing is wasted. And so the successful companies, they were able to achieve buy-in and support from an executive at the VP level. This helped them to maintain focus, and it also was a message that this is important. Lastly, we've hinted at this, in that you need enough historical data to derive, set up, and validate the SLIs and SLOs. And I would add to also correlate those SLIs with the business KPIs, because in doing so, you wind up building credibility. So what do you need to make your SLO journey smooth? Here we have our SRE, our hero. He says he's glad to have tools and processes that support the SLI, SLO methodology of first-class citizen. And one of the things that you may have noticed along the way is, yes, it's possible to put something in place, but it seems like an awful lot of energy and effort. And so we would suggest that you need to have tools and processes that support the SLO methodologies of first-class citizen. And what we mean by that is user journeys are central, and so you need a infrastructure to make user journey discovery low cost, the monitoring and the instrumentation setup of user journeys to be easy. And most importantly, the maintenance or the care aspect of this needs to be low cost as well. The user journeys need to be treated as first-class citizens. They can't be bolted on. They are at the core of the SLO methodology, and they can't be a second-class citizen. I think it was in step 6, we talked about the effort around not only instrumenting, but creating dashboards to illustrate the most important things. And we would suggest that the most important things are to show those services that are the biggest error budget offenders. If you can identify the services that are the biggest error budget offenders, then you know the engineering team that needs to work on that. And it's easier to show the engineering team as well if you can track this in a dashboard. We also want to show the impacted user journey. So it's not just within the microservices architecture, it's also the customer impact. And which user journeys are having issues, aren't meeting their SLOs, are in danger of not meeting their SLOs, and by how much. In the last couple of slides, we touched on alerting around the error budget burn rate, which is a new concept. We also want to alert on endangered SLOs. And there's a problem that our heroes set aside that we mentioned, and that was troubleshooting SLO violations. And again, if you step back, this involves all of the above. It involves starting from user journeys and then translating those user journeys into the services, the call graphs, the service dependencies in your microservices architecture. And then possibly having to drill down from the software layer into the infrastructure layer to see, is there any infrastructure that might be causing the SLOs to be violated? So the troubleshooting is a core aspect of this. And with that, we have reached the end of our journey. And I'd like to thank you. And I think we're now open for your questions. Okay.
Excellent, excellent. So we've gotten some questions in now, but there's plenty of time. If you have a question for Curtis, please go ahead and use your GoToWebinar control panel and submit it. And let's go ahead and get started with the ones we have. Okay, let's see. What was the success rate you observed in the adoption of SLO?
Yury, would you like to take this?
So yeah, I was looking for the mute button. Yeah, so the success rate was actually not that high, unfortunately, yet. And what we saw was that around 10% organizations were really able to turn this methodology into a decision-making tool, as Curtis mentioned it in the beginning. What is actually where is actually the true value of the methodology, where the true value of the methodology is, so that it helps organizations to really introduce a common language and a common facts on which they can make their decisions about, where to invest more in the reliability, or what are the user journeys that maybe have a good enough reliability and can actually do more, invest more time into, adding new features, and where, whether certain, it also informs some business decisions, right? As it was also mentioned by Vickers before, like whether we can afford, or whether it is a good time, for example, to place a certain sales campaign. We also saw that happening in those organizations which were successful to implement this.
All right, great. Next question here. How can an organization benefit from SLOs?
I think one of the things that SLOs bring is an objective metric that multiple parties agree to. As a product manager, we're challenged by having to choose between new features, technical debt, infrastructure changes, security, well, not maybe security, but technology updates, and all the other things, bug backlog. This is a way to make those sorts of decisions less based on the loudest voices in the room. I'm sure that everybody has had the opportunity to look at a decision about either a new technology or fixing a bug or implementing a new feature and think that may not have been the right decision. But the reason it was made is because there's a loud voice in the room. By using SLOs, now you take the voice out of the equation. Instead, what you have is some numbers, and you can look at the numbers and you can compare the numbers with the business goals. So now the decision is framed in terms of what changes should we make to better achieve our business goals, rather than how do we make that loud voice stop yelling at us, right? It's a way to communicate across all the different groups, provided that they all are speaking the same language. So that's how we're using it. Yury, do you have any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think you actually covered it quite well, and I think this introducing really allowing the alignment top, from like business side, SRE side, developer side, aligning across a single kind of sort of KPI, right? And also the adding an error budget policy to that helps making some informed decisions, right? Which are otherwise kind of turn into discussions with comparing apples and oranges, right? And some really lengthy discussions going in circles otherwise.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, guys, there's plenty of time for questions. If you have one, just go ahead and use your GoToWebinar control panel and submit it. Here's our next question. How do you define SLOs and SLIs for new transactions? Since it will be new to the customer and I do not have any historical data for that specific microservice.
Right. So just to be clear, the way we're approaching this is based on the user journeys. And in that case, we wouldn't necessarily be talking about a single microservice. We'd be talking about what you would call the business transaction and how the customer sees it. So in that case, you may need to wait to get some actual measurement data to understand what the SLI should be and how to combine those into an SLO. Of course, there's always the alternative if you can compare that user journey with other user journeys and see if there's some approaches that transfer over. Right? If you're dealing with a shopping cart and you have an existing shopping cart, then you can use a similar thing. It's, this is the art of engineering, I think, that we practice, and you know, it may be that if there's enough business criticality here, that you want to add some budget in the implementation to instrument it and to adjust the SLIs and SLOs and get the data perhaps in real time, and use that to guide what your, say, final SLO would be. I would suggest starting slow and cautiously, right? Because the challenge of the SLO methodology is it's fairly new. And to some people who would be critical, they would look to a lot of noise to discredit it. So with new technologies, we want to focus on the most successful opportunities and build credibility too. So that's the political side of this, which we tried to highlight. I hope that came through. So I'd suggest caution as well.
All right, great. Next question here. It looks like it's our final question, so hopefully we'll get a couple more questions in before we close out the question and answer period. Okay, what value would a product manager get from SLOs?
So Yury, I've done a lot of talking. I'm going to turn that over to you.
Yeah, sure. So I think what we also observed in reality is that product managers, after some time, start to really also see value and benefit from this topic, from this methodology as well, right? And I think also Curtis mentioned that, you know, some of like even business decisions are made, right, based on the current service level indicator values, for example, right? So if we're actually having a bad week in terms of the reliability, maybe it's not the best time for publishing that sales campaign, for example, right? Because if the SLIs are done correctly, right, then they actually gonna correlate very well with, for example, a conversion rate, right? And that means if the SLI value go down, the conversion rate goes down as well. And another way to benefit is also for the product manager to be able to make better some better expectations, for example, when it comes to the new features, which are when they'll be released, right? So if we have a air budget policy that says we have a feature freeze as soon as the SLO is violated, that will probably affect some expectations in terms of time on some new features which are being developed, right? So that also helps to that product manager to properly maintain those expectations with his stakeholders. Yeah, so that would be a couple of examples of how product managers can benefit from it.
All right, great. Let's see if we've gotten any more questions in. It doesn't look like we've gotten any more questions in. So while we're waiting to see if we do get any in, just want to remind the audience that today's event has been recorded. So if you missed any or all of it, or if you just want to watch it again, you'll have the opportunity to do so. Following today's event, we will be sending out an email that contains a link to access the webinar on demand. And the webinar is also going to be available on the devops.com website. So you can always go look for it there. You can just go to devops.com/webinars, look in the on-demand section, and it should be right there waiting for you. Okay, looks like we actually did get one more question in, so I'll go ahead and ask that one. What is the best way to train internal staff, SREs, on SLO development?
Maybe I'll try to answer that question. So the approach we saw in general successful is to sort of first start with a single team, typically that would be a team, high performer team, right? On other project initiatives and projects as well, and use them as a sort of lighthouse, and aim for, as outlined, 2 to 4 weeks of time investment at the beginning, right? Especially if you already have some tooling and monitoring in place. There is a lot of material out there available about how to, right? The technical details, the definitions of service level indicators, the definitions of how to compute the error budget, for example. So Google does a really amazing job on defining this methodology and also popularizing it. And there is plenty of material available there on how to the technical aspects of it. And yeah, start with a single team. Aim for getting to the dry run in 2 to 4 weeks, and then from that moment of time, show that that it works, right? Help the team really adopt the error budget policy internally, right, and change their processes with that. And then just scale it out, right, to other teams. That would be that.
Excellent.
Right, rough. Yeah.
Okay. All right, great. Got one more question in here for you. Do you normally see embedded or dedicated SREs, or a central team of SREs, or a hybrid model? And what are the pros and cons of each model?
Typically what we saw, that's indeed a central SRE, initiating this this topic. Those who were more successful, they would have a lead SRE pushing for this topic. Sometimes even maybe a CTO behind it pushing for it. Yeah, that's the kind of what we typically observe, right? But I think it would also work very well in a single team, right? So if there is a single team with a really right, SRE being part of that team, pushing his or her own team for SLOs, right, and really adopting. I think that this is also possible, that this just works in a single team, right? If this is a true product team, right, that means they have the freedom and autonomy to make their own decisions in respect to their roadmap and where they're actually focusing in terms of reliability and features work.
Yeah, I have a couple comments. I think his last two questions are around how do we approach this to be successful? And in particular, the last question is around sort of organizational structure. What we see is that a lot of organizations are having developers own their services in production, and the SREs are there as well. If you have that kind of situation, and you have, as Yury mentioned, some people who are high achievers, who like embracing new technologies, then I think you have the ingredients for success, right? You have both sides who are knowledgeable about production. They're knowledgeable and experts in their areas, and they also want to move things forward, right? Then the next ingredient would be to find a product manager who's amenable to that as well, who's open to new ideas, who's open to evolving not only the technology, but also the business processes, the business decision making. I think if you have those three things, you're well on your way to being able to succeed. I think that's what I would suggest.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay. Well, we are about 5 minutes to the top of the hour, so I'm going to go ahead and close out the question and answer period. I think we got to all of the questions, but if there are any last minute questions you have for Curtis or Yury, please go ahead and just throw it into the GoToWebinar control panel. And please know that the folks over at their company will be getting a copy of all of the questions. So somebody from the organization will be more than happy to follow up with you offline. Also, again, want to remind the audience that today's event has been recorded. So if you want to watch it again, you'll have the opportunity to do so. We will be sending out an email after today's webinar that contains a link to access the webinar on demand. And as I said earlier, the webinar is also going to be living on the devops.com website. So you can always go look for it there. Just go to devops.com/webinars, look in the on demand section, and it should be right there waiting for you. While you're there, please check out the other webinars that we have, both upcoming and on demand. Hopefully there'll be something that piques your interest. Okay, before we close things out, I do want to go ahead and do the drawing for the 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get to that. Our first winner today is Andrew K. Congratulations, Andrew. Second winner today, Bill P. Congratulations, Bill. Third winner, Lucas Y. Congratulations, Lucas. And our final winner today is Raphael P. Congratulations, Raphael. Guys, check your inbox for information on getting your $25 Amazon gift card. If you don't see it in your inbox, please check your spam folders. Curtis and Yury, thank you so much for a great webinar. Lots of really, really interesting information. I was not that well versed on SLOs, but now I feel like I know just about everything there is to know about the process or the method. So thank you very much. Appreciate your time. Appreciate your expertise.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Also want to thank the audience for joining me today. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I am signing off. Have a great day, everybody. Please stay safe.